says.
Also means that it'd be a nightmare, like if Trump decides to get up and take a piss, that no one else is moving.
Yep, I got you.
Fan's a nice touch. Fan.
I was just telling Brad I got closest to it, and you're getting some. But
Feels great on Lou right now.
I'm on the curve, so I got enough. I'm good.
1 minute.
I'll start to drool on myself. Just hand me a napkin, please.
All right, fellas, let's do it. Have a good one.
Do they want us to address the camera at times when we're talking? Or
I don't know. I always
He told me to talk to you guys
Okay.
about the conversation.
and let the cameras punch it. Sometimes I'll look at the main one, camera green, but. This is a live look at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, 1 hour away from UFC 264. Of course, it will be capped off with the trilogy bout, Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor, but a slew of interesting matchups ahead of us, and a live look at the busy Las Vegas Strip. Again, within an hour, fans will be descending into the T-Mobile Arena, and we are live here just outside the arena. I am Doug Kezirian alongside ESPN insider Brett Okamoto, as well as Lou Finocchiaro, an expert UFC handicapper. You've seen him maybe on the Behind the Bets podcast. Both of you have been guests, and we've obviously done tons of coverage leading up to this. So, gentlemen, obviously a huge event here. It's the first one with fans in Las Vegas since the pandemic, and we're going to be capping it all off with Conor and Dustin as well, Brett.
It worked out real well, right? The schedule to come back here at T-Mobile Arena, where they haven't been since March of 2020, just so happened Conor is the guy to do it in a must-win situation. I mean, I don't think Conor McGregor's career is going to end if he loses tonight, but I do think it's going to. This is a crossroads, and it's going to really change the narrative of how we're looking at him and what we're saying about him, moving forward this one night.
And Lou, obviously the significance of this fight, and we'll get into picks later in it, but Brett basically hit on it. It is a crossroads for Conor's career.
I think it's also a crossroads for Dustin. He wins this, he gets arguably a title shot. If he doesn't, he has to fall back into a steep, stacked group of lightweights to try and get back and compete.
We'll be with you for the next 20 minutes or so. We will end things with our picks on the main card and the main event, but let's take you through the upcoming bouts essentially chronologically. Now, we did have a minor setback. We had one on the card that was had to be canceled due to COVID situations, but the early prelims that start in about an hour from now on ESPN and ESPN Plus, we have Jennifer Maia and Jessica Ai here is the first one that stands out to me. And I've heard a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of experts alongside you two as well, and I haven't spoken with one person I respect that's picking Jessica Ai here. Does that concern you, Lou, when sometimes you have everyone on one side and a reasonable favorite at minus 195?
Normally it would, yes, Doug, because I don't, especially if it's that favorite that they're favoring, I'll tend to want to look real hard at the other fighter. In this case, the two athletes physically are very similar, but success-wise very different. I think Jennifer Maia, coming off that loss to Shevchenko, showed an awful lot. Meanwhile, Jessica Ai has had some struggles. Halls, and I think these are two ships kind of going in different directions.
Yeah, that was probably the most impressive bout, that loss to Shevchenko in my eyes. Now, I has also faced Shevchenko. That was in 2019. Brett, anything stand out to you in terms of this matchup?
Well, yeah, Lou mentioned it. You know, when everybody's zigging, you kind of want to zag in gambling, correct? But you got to ask yourself, why is everybody zigging? And I would be a little concerned if everybody was thinking, well, Jennifer Maia, man, I mean, she won one round against Valentina Shevchenko. That's a big deal. I mean, this girl's really good. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think people are looking at this matchup correctly and saying, no, Jennifer Maia is just in a better spot in her career than Jessica Ai is. And it's one of those fights to me where if it comes down to where the fight takes place, I like Jennifer Maia's ability to dictate where this fight takes place. And if it's close, if it's a close competitive fight, that can oftentimes tip the balance of who has the ability to take this fight where they want to go and win it on the judges' scorecards. In this situation, I think it's Maia.
And do you think she's going to try to get on the ground? Because plus 550 for submission. Just throwing it out there. Plus 550.
Yeah, I mean, I think she could have a lot of success on the ground. I think she's going to take what Jessica Ai gives her in this fight. I don't think she's going to have this one game plan that has to work. But like I mentioned, if there comes a time where this fight's close and she needs to win a round, I like her ability to push up Jessica Ai to the fence. I like her ability to get a takedown. I can't say the same for Jessica Ai.
Lou, another matchup on the card. I know you guys both favor the underdog here. Ryan Hill against Topuria. What stands out and why do you like the dog here?
This is fascinating. As I like to address the fights, I like to address the physicality of each fighter. What country do they come from? Are they similar or are they different? In this case, we have two polished Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialists. One is 24 years old, 5'7", with a 10-0 record. He's young, he's powerful, and he's confident. The other man is longer, taller, very odd, and extremely one-dimensional in his fight game from what we've seen. Now, he's had plenty of time to develop his striking because no one wants a fight with this kid. Young Topuria from Spain stepped up. He says he isn't afraid. His BJJ, Topuria feels, is equal to Ryan Hall's. I believe that based on Topuria's confidence, I think he's overlooking Hall a little bit here. Hall is very, very nonchalant. He's got an excellent corner, and I think he's really a live underdog here.
Nonchalant is one word for him.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get much more nonchalant than Ryan Hall, and I agree with everything Lou said. I was a little surprised that the line was as wide as it is. I mean, just seeing Ryan Hall as this big of an underdog against really anybody, not to mention a guy who's only had 2 fights in the UFC. I think that it's interesting to me is because usually nobody wants any piece of Ryan Hall on the ground. I mean, you see it in guys who are literally just running away from his guard once he falls down. I don't know if Topuria is going to do that, and so that could end up leading to us seeing some prolonged exchanges on the ground, which we just don't get to see in Ryan Hall fights. So I'm looking forward to that, and I don't think that it would be a great idea for Topuria to do it. Maybe he really proves something to us. Maybe he gets into the guard of Ryan Hall and he comes out with a win. But if you can avoid that guard of Ryan Hall, I think you always should.
So you explained that the fight, and we always look for value. That's something we talk about often in the betting world. The price kind of caught you by surprise with how high it is. Any concern for Rust and why you like Hall?
You know, rust is one of those relative things. You know, some guys are going to feel it, some guys aren't. I think that one thing in Ryan Hall's favor is that he was booked to have fights in 2020. Unfortunately, they just didn't happen, man. I mean, the 2020 was supposed to be his year. He was a little frustrated in the beginning because he wasn't getting the fights he wanted. Then he got a fight with Ricardo Lamas. That didn't happen. Got a fight with Dan Ige. That would have been a huge fight for Ryan Hall. It didn't happen because, unfortunately, he got injured. But he was in camp training during those times. He was in camp preparing for those different styles. So I think Ryan Hall is going to be good to go. He's a very, very cerebral guy. Ring rust doesn't scare me too much in this one.
Lou, why the dog?
The dog because of experience, frustration in trying to get a fight, and a little naivety out of the Spaniard.
On the other side. Okay. I'm on under 2.5, by the way, in this one. It gets a little juicy, minus 150, but there's a lot of time in between there. 12.5 minutes to get an ending to that. Would you go over or under, at least a lean there?
I would lean towards the under, yeah. I think, and again, it's because, you know, a lot of times when you see Ryan Hall fights, it's a lot of non-engagement because they don't want to engage with Ryan Hall. I do think Topuria is going to engage with him, and that, of course, is going to open the door for a lot more opportunity for a finish.
Yeah, one guy on top of the other for a while. That does concern me if you have the under, but sometimes you got to absorb some of the risk. Okay, there are tons of fights on this card. You just mentioned the intrigue of that one. Anytime Carlos Condit steps into the octagon, it is certainly interesting. Former interim champion will be facing Max Payne Griffin in this welterweight clash. Condit, not too long ago, we had a 5-fight skid, right? And a lot of people writing him off, but here he is back in the win column and always drawing eyeballs.
Yeah, he seems to be just in a really good place. Not a whole lot of pressure. You know, when you go through that experience of I'm retired, you know, I'm walking away from the sport, and then you decide to come back because you really want to. I think it wasn't a situation where Carlos Condit truly did. He just wasn't done. I mean, even in retirement, I was hearing that this guy was still in the gym. He's just a lifelong martial artist. But, you know, he is that guy who other guys are trying to make their name off of now, and that is the situation with Max Griffin. You know, Max Griffin has been a guy who's kind of been overlooked in this division. It's not like he's a new kid on the block. He's been here. He's been in some big fights. And his confidence is just through the charts right now. I think you had to ask me what the biggest thing about Max Griffin right now and what I'm seeing from him in recent fights. He just knows himself. He knows himself. He's very confident. He's not going to be caught off guard by fighting the guy that he idolizes, Carlos Condit.
Lou, I look at your sheet there that you have all sorts of colors, highlighters. This thing has been written up, and you're big on your waiting until weigh-ins for your final thoughts. I love how thorough you are.
Thank you.
Translate what you have for this bout between Condit and Griffin.
Well, to people in the internet age, it's, you know, smoke signals and pigeons, but it works for me.
Yeah.
At least as far as this fight's concerned, the physical advantage is all to Condit, the taller man, the longer man, maybe even the more experienced man, whereas Payne Griffin is the more structured, powerful, explosive fighter, a little bit younger, and he comes in with great momentum.
It is expected to go the distance, so we should be in for a treat this one. -$2 to go the distance, over 2.5, also about 2.25. Who do you like in this bout?
In this fight, I think that Max Griffin's momentum, his explosion, is really right for tonight. And Condit is the kind of fighter that Max Griffin needs because he's got no fear. He knows why he's been called, and he's going to go right to the center of the octagon and get it on.
So play into Griffin, right? What about you? Anything?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Griffin is the favorite for a reason. You know,
Okay.
I think Condit, the one thing that scares me always about Condit is that he does like to throw a lot of volume. I mean, sometimes these guys later on in their careers, they get a little, they get into a situation where they're not pulling the trigger. I mean, Carlos Condit, like Lou just said, I mean, he's been back now out of retirement for a while. He's been active. He clearly wants to fight, and he's not having a problem pulling the trigger. So if this fight is close, it makes you a little worrisome that, you know, the guy likes to throw so much, and the crowd's going to be going crazy every time Carlos Condit lands because he's that fan favorite. But Max Griffin should win this fight.
And Lou, just to clarify, you like him using favorites in parlays because you don't like to be exposed and lay such juice just to manage that bankroll, right?
Ideally, what I like to do is invest 5, maybe 6 units, whatever that is. And to blow a unit on a -190 or -180 is too expensive. So in a wager, I want to use 1 unit and I want to make more, and that's bedrock to what I do.
Okay. I look at a lot of these fights, I'm like, oh, that could be my most I mean, we all want to see the main event, right? And then you see other ones like, well, this next one really has me super intrigued with Nico Price and Pereira just because of the styles. I mean, Price, you have 3 performance of the nights bonuses in recently, and then obviously Pereira speaks for itself. What stands out when you first assess this, because you obviously are close and get to interact with these fighters so much?
Great matchmaking, you know,
Sure.
for all the reasons you said. You know, they like to have Michel Pereira in these fun fights. And, you know, I know that the UFC matchmaking, quite frankly, there have been sometimes where you're like, he's too crazy, man.
Yeah.
Get to
Almost
fighting.
like a sideshow
Get to
in a way.
fighting, you know. But in the last few fights, man, Michel has found a happy balance to me. And I look at him as very legitimate. I mean, if you go back in time and you see this guy doing backflips in the middle of the octagon, you're like, all right, is this guy a legitimate guy? Or he's doing a backflip off of the scale even. He's like, is this guy a legitimate fighter? Or is he just out there trying to make viral moments? Well, he's trying to do both. I think he has looked like a legitimate fighter in his last few. I think he's very dangerous to anybody in that welterweight division. The reason why I kind of like Nico Price in this is I look at the line, about +145 for Nico. It's about the same that Chaos Williams was against Michel Pereira, and I think Nico Price has more ways to win this fight. So even though if I had to, you know, just pick straight up, Pereira, I'm not surprised that he's the favorite, but to have Nico Price at the exact same price as Chaos Williams was, I just think, nothing against Chaos Williams, but I think Nico has more ways to win than Chaos did.
To be fair, if I could do the backflip or even the forward flip from the ground up, I would probably do it as well on stage if I could. So I don't blame Pereira at all. Lou, what's the angle you're approaching here?
A great fight, as you gentlemen mentioned. 2 aggressive guys. Price is not used to being the shorter slider fighter, so that's going to be an adjustment for him. And for Pereira, of course, it's focus and the ability to stay on track, stay on plan. It looked like he did a phenomenal job of that against Chaos Williams in his last fight, and he's going to have to give that to us again because any kind of distraction or cartwheel or funny action in that ring could get him KO'd because Price is dangerous everywhere. But I like the bigger, more athletic Pereira in this one.
Okay, so you're willing to lay the juice there. You just like Pereira, and he clearly has the goods. I would lay it too. Maybe mix in a parlay here and there, or just kind of manage the bankroll. The UFC, just the structure of the sport, it's okay to lose as opposed to like boxing, things like that. So sometimes you just got to be careful when you have one huge favorite and things like that, although 180 isn't necessarily a huge favorite. Let's go to the main card. Obviously, a slew of entertaining options here. We'll get to Poirier and Conor McGregor, which we haven't seen a ton of line movement this past week or so. But let's first start lower on the list with Tuivasa and Greg Hardy. And I always joke on Daily Wager, you know, what are the most painful things to bet and just endure as you watch? Like Steph Curry under on some prop bets. Not a lot of fun to watch. Not a lot of a high enjoyment factor. And for heavyweights, it's betting overs because you can see it, one haymaker will end it. Now that obviously is the case in any class, but you see it in the haymakers. And this fight with Tuivasa and Hardy certainly shapes up to being trading off of haymakers.
There's going to be no time wasted at all in this fight. And then I think if they're not able to knock each other out, then you're going to see the effects of no time wasted. You're going to see both these guys get pretty tired pretty quickly. But you know, it's one of those fights that I personally probably wouldn't bet it just because for all the reasons you said, man. I mean, these guys are going to go out and they're going to swing at each other from the first bell, and there's just a lot of volatility in that. Greg has shown he is so dangerous, man. In the first minute, 2 minutes, this guy is incredibly dangerous, but that's it. That's all he's got. And he hasn't shown us anything other than that. And Tai Tuivasa, he's had some problems in the past as well. He's shown sort of, I don't want to call it a low fight IQ, but he's kind of handed away fights that I thought that he should have won. But I kind of like, if I had to make a pick on this one, I would take Ty's experience. I do think he's just a little bit more of the martial artist. But I will say, to me, Greg is the more dangerous man, especially, again, in those first 2 minutes.
We look at the list here of Hardy's fights in his UFC career. At the bottom was his debut against Alan Crowder, -$5, and he was lost. Now, obviously, there is a storyline with Hardy coming over from the NFL, so it's certainly interesting. And you look at the fluctuation of money lines there. We typically have more of a tighter market, if you will, with fighters, but there was such an unknown with Greg Hardy making the transfer over, and a huge favorite, -$5, and he loses out of the gates. So this probably won't be the most technically sound fight tonight between these two heavyweights. What are you looking for in terms of things that you stand out in your handicapping?
In my handicapping, it's been enhanced by my ability to go to interviews and see these weigh-ins. The interviews, Hardy clearly mentioned that he was rankled by someone in the press calling him a quitter. I like edge in my fighters, especially 6'5", 266-pound fighters. And so I think Hardy, an athletic, explosive man that knows he has trouble on the ground and knows he has cardio troubles, is up for this fight because Tuivasa, even though he spent time at AKA learning some wrestling, spent this camp in Australia because of the lockdown and COVID. He is planning on returning to AKA. That tells me he hasn't been working on the wrestling like he should. This fight's going to be standing in the middle of the octagon toe-to-toe. I do like Greg Hardy.
When you hear these narratives, and I like to joke in all sports, really, like amateur psychologists, we play sometimes with handicapping, when there is storylines like Conor, maybe the last fight, is he not training as hard as he should and things like that. What do you hear when you hear some of the stuff? Because you talk to these guys, and to get to the UFC, to get to the cusp, to get into the octagon, it sounds funny for someone like myself to question their dedication, their fitness or whatever, because they're all such elite fighters. But these, when you kind of have to split hairs at this level.
It's a great nugget that he brought up, right, that Greg said that he didn't like it, that someone called him a quitter. But Greg he's got that NFL media training, man. And from the moment he came into the UFC, he's been saying all the right things. I haven't really seen any these huge improvements in his game, though. Where are these improvements that this guy is supposed to be making? And if I'm not mistaken, he told Laura Sanko this week that he got all the way up to 340 pounds between fights.
Wow.
That to me is not a guy who's in the gym, working on his game, trying to get better and silence the haters. That's a guy who got up to 340 pounds, Doug.
That's no joke. That's legit 340. Okay, so I'm about to say the word co-main event, not something you're going to hear a lot in the last week and up until tonight because it's such a spotlight with Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. But we do have another intriguing matchup, and it is officially the co-main event as well, and Gilbert Burns and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Now, Burns is known as probably someone who's going to want to attack and get inside, but he only has one submission over the last 5 years, a span of 11 fights, Lou. But that's got to be the attack, the plan of attack here he does for Thompson.
I think Gil Burns really started at 55, now 70. He's a 160-pound fighter. He's a little bit of a tweener, a little undersized here. And I think that time without a submission was just time developing striking, to be honest. And he's developed it well. He's got great power. But the physical stature and his fight style is going to mandate that he has to get inside and penetrate the length, the precision, the athleticism, and the knees and elbows of Stevie Wonderboy Thompson. I think that's going to be really, really difficult for him to do. And I really feel Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is a most underrated welterweight in this division.
The most underrated, wow.
Yes.
Okay, what about you? What's your kind of initial takeaway from the matchup?
Yeah, it's in line with everything that Lou said, although I have a little bit more optimism in Burns' ability and his comfort level in going forward, because that's what this guy does. That's what this guy does in all of his fights. He presses forward, he closes the distance, he's got great hand speed. The last time Stephen Thompson fought a guy who was sort of in that tweener, or he should be probably fighting 165, was Anthony Pettis. And that was kind of, I don't want to call it a fluky result, because Anthony Pettis is a great knockout artist, but it was a situation where we're like, wow, one punch knocked him out. But what does Anthony Pettis and Gilbert Burns have in common? They're both quick. They're both former lightweights, right? They moved up to welterweight, and they carry power in their hands. So Stephen Thompson should be the favorite in this fight. The fight starts off, it's his advantage. They're starting, on the opposite ends of the octagon. The premise is on, the pressure is on Gilbert to close that distance. But I like his ability to do so. And if he's able to get the fight to the ground, then he holds a significant advantage.
So I'm getting the idea that we might be split here. Where are you going here, with the dog?
I would go with the dog, yeah. If I'm betting this fight, I like the plus 130. If it was more of a pick'em fight, maybe I would take Stephen Thompson. But if you're getting Gilbert Burns, who has only lost at welterweight, to Kamaru Usman, I think there's some value there.
All right, so certainly value. That's what we look for if you plus money and split hairs. In a tip of the cap to the natural, pick me out a winner, Bobby, on this fight with Wonderboy.
Yeah, I'm going to take Wonderboy because I think it's going to be important for Gil to try and get inside, and it's going to leave him open to counters and such. No question, if he gets this down, he's in dominant position, but he's not going to get it down based on a 30-foot octagon and athleticism with Stevie Ray Thompson. I would close the parlay with Max Payne Griffin with Stephen Thompson.
And then you create your own plus money along those
situation.
lines. Okay, we've reached that point of the program. Here we are in a balmy 115 degrees or so. We got the fans blowing, but it is going to be even hotter inside the arena tonight with Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. We all know that Poirier was the significant underdog in their January bout. Poirier opened about a pick'em, and we've seen the sharp money move this in Poirier's favor, and we have not seen the McGregor money arrive yet. I've talked to odds makers. There's a few different shops over the last couple hours, and there was some concern, or I guess unknown, concern's the wrong word, just skepticism that the McGregor money would arrive because the Irish Army may not be arriving because of limited international travel as we are getting out of the pandemic. So we don't have that usual just wave of cash as recreational bettors tend to bet on the guy they like, and there's no bigger draw in UFC history than Conor McGregor. So it looks like we're holding firm, at least for now, with Poirier as the favorite. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And it does not surprise me that the line is not moving because, as you mentioned, that the Irish fans are not showing up because of the travel restrictions. And also the casual fan who's just kind of watching this all unfold, maybe not liking what they're seeing from Conor McGregor. I mean, I think that they like the bluster. They tune in for it. But when you see a guy in Dustin Poirier who just knocked him out 6 months ago looking very, very comfortable during it all, I think if I'm a casual guy out there who frankly just kind of knows the nuts and bolts of this matchup, I'm like, man, that guy on the left doesn't look too bad. That guy on the right looks like he's forcing things a little bit. So I'm not surprised that the line is not moving. As far as where the line is, yeah, I think that this is a pick'em fight. I talked to all these different people in the industry. It's kind of the same thing over and over again. Conor McGregor is extremely dangerous in the first 7 minutes, but once it gets to the second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, that's Dustin Poirier territory.
Yeah, Brett touched on it. Lou, recreational bettors we know like to bet with their hearts, but they also bet with what they last saw. Sometimes that is just a lasting impression. It's recency bias, and obviously that was Poirier in a dominating event with just really kind of dominated by the storyline of leg kicks.
So we have to ask ourselves, what has Conor done in 4 or 5 months that's going to change the narrative of that first fight? And focus, training, renewed enthusiasm, all that, I'll buy all of that. I really will. And I think that manifests itself in a better effort for Conor. I think rather than planting on that boxing foot, he gets back to movement and karate and spatial control, and all that manifests itself to me in this fight tending to get into the second, third, and fourth rounds. I know Conor starts fast and he has power. Most of that was 145, not 155, men.
Yeah, and you were saying you think 15-pound difference once they actually get into the octagon, give or take?
Poirier will weigh $182, 83 tonight, and
wow.
Conor will weigh 167 to 168. So they'll be a bigger man against a faster, more articulate man.
And it's a bigger octagon tonight as well compared to the January meeting. How do you see it playing out, and what would you play if you had to?
Well, to me, it's really interesting, and I'll defer to you guys because you guys, your knowledge of the betting trends and how the lines move is greater than mine. But in my mind, if you were on Conor McGregor the first time, or I guess in January, the second time, the rematch, you got to be on him again this time, right? Because if you were taking him, at lines of minus 200, minus 250, all the way up to minus 300, now you can get him at plus 110. You're going to get a better version of Conor McGregor in this fight. I guarantee it. I am very, very confident that we are going to get a better version of Conor McGregor. Now, does that mean he's going to win the fight? I'm not sure. But if you had to pay minus 200, minus 300 for Conor back then, and now you can get a plus.
So in all your interaction, he's all in. There's no concern.
He's all in. I believe that we will get a better version of Conor McGregor this time around. I was still picking Poirier because I think he just has more ways to win. But if you liked Conor in the second fight, you got to love him here.
It's a good point about laying the juice previously. What about you?
In the fight in February, I had Conor, but I had him on the props by KO, TKO. I'm not picking a side. I'm going with the over.
And over what? There's some different options.
Yes, over 1.5 is minus 185, but find over 2.5. It's available everywhere. That's a plus 110. That's my position.
And so like minus 200 would be about 67%. And I think there's a higher likelihood than that. So I think there is value on the over 1.5 because I think Poirier knows that Conor wants to go early. He's a sprinter, not a marathoner. I think with the bigger octagon, and he's got a chin like no other. Poirier. He hasn't been knocked out in nearly 5 years. September of 2016. He's only been submitted by Nurmagomedov. So I trust Poirier's durability in this. So I like over 1.5 as well. And I like rounds 3, 4, and 5. Kind of create my own prop. Poirier went to win exactly in 3, exactly in 4 and 5. You can chop up the units and almost create your own prop of 5 to 1 or so. So
beautiful.
That's my play because I think Poirier, that's the path to victory, so to speak. But I certainly would not be so shocked if McGregor wins. So there you go. ESPNplus.com/pay-per-view. Just should be an electric card. We've just touched on a handful of fights coming up here from T-Mobile Arena. Again, all gets going top of the hour on ESPN, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN Plus as well, fellas. It's been a blast. You got to go hit the pool now. Lou Finocchiaro, Brett Okamoto, and I'm Doug Kezirian. Enjoy the card. Again, it starts top of the hour as we are live outside of T-Mobile Arena.
Oh.